Cowboy rescued Apache in a canyon storm, and the return at Twilight carried a truth carved in bone. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Jack Thompson had always prided himself on being a man of few words. Living alone on the outskirts of a small western town, he preferred the company of his horses and the open land over that of others. With his worn hat and the dust of the trail etched into his weathered skin, he was the very image of a cowboy. But there was something in the air tonight, a tension in the wind as the storm clouds gathered ominously over the canyon. Jack stood near the edge, his trusty horse tethered to a nearby post, and stared out into the vast emptiness, feeling the pulse of the storm building. The wind howled through the canyon walls, and the first raindrops began to fall in heavy sheets, drumming against the earth with a fury that matched the rising tempest. He wasn't the superstitious type, but even Jack could feel the weight of the storm, as if it were carrying something more than just rain. It was in the way the sky darkened, the clouds swirling like a gathering army, and in the way the land seemed to hold its breath. And then he heard it, a faint cry, barely audible over the deafening wind. Jack's instincts kicked in. Without a second thought, he mounted his horse, urging it forward into the heart of the storm. The rain poured down in torrents, the wind tearing at his coat as the storm raged around him. He pushed forward, his eyes scanning the landscape for any sign of life. The canyon was treacherous, the jagged rocks and narrow paths barely visible in the deluge, but Jack didn't hesitate. The sound of the cry grew louder, desperate, and Jack knew someone was in trouble. His heart raced as he followed the sound, his horse navigating the treacherous terrain with the kind of sure-footedness that only comes from years of experience. And there, in a small clearing near the edge of the canyon, he saw her. A young Apache woman, soaked to the bone, struggling to keep her footing as the rain pounded down relentlessly. Her face was streaked with mud and tears, her clothes tattered and torn, but there was a strength in her eyes that caught Jack off guard. She was barely standing, her legs wobbling as she fought to stay upright, but her gaze was steady, unwavering. Without a moment's hesitation, Jack dismounted, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her onto his horse. She didn't resist, but Jack could feel her tense against him, as if she were unsure whether to trust him. "Hang on," he said, his voice low and steady as he spurred his horse into action, racing against the storm, the canyon's winding paths barely visible in the torrential downpour. The wind howled around them, but Jack rode on, determined to get her to safety. Hours passed, and when they finally reached shelter, the storm began to subside. Jack led the horse into a small cave, the walls damp and cold, but it was dry enough to offer some respite from the storm. As they dismounted, Jack helped the woman to her feet, his hands steady despite the exhaustion of the ride. She glanced at him, her eyes full of gratitude but also something more, something Jack couldn't quite place. She spoke in a language Jack didn't understand, her words soft but urgent. He couldn't help but feel a sense of duty, something deeper than just the act of helping a stranger. She was more than that. She was someone who had crossed his path for a reason. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the canyon still and silent in its wake. Jack woke early, his muscles sore from the long ride, but he was unable to shake the feeling that something was different now. The woman was gone. There was no sign of her, not even a trace of her footprints in the dirt. For days, Jack wondered if he had imagined the whole thing. Had she truly been real? Or had the storm played tricks on his mind? But then, at twilight, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the sky, Jack heard the sound of hooves. He turned, and there she was, the Apache woman, standing tall and proud, her eyes now fierce with purpose. Behind her, an entire tribe of Apache warriors had gathered, their faces painted for war. They had come not for vengeance, but for something much deeper. She had returned, and in her eyes Jack could see the truth carved in bone, the truth of their bond, of the respect and honor they had shared in that moment of desperation. And in that moment, Jack realized that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can ripple through time, carving a path that neither of them could have predicted. Days passed since the storm had subsided, and Jack Thompson found himself alone again, as he had always been. The quiet of the canyon was once more his only companion. He continued with his daily routines, caring for his horses, checking the fences, and mending the barn. Yet something had changed within him, a nagging feeling that kept him awake at night, questioning the brief encounter he had experienced. Was it truly real? The storm had been violent, and in the chaos, he might have imagined the woman. He thought about her often, the way her eyes had looked at him, not with fear, but with a sense of recognition, as if she had known him long before they had met. Jack tried to shake the feeling off, telling himself it was just a fleeting moment, a storm-driven fantasy. But then, one evening as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the silence was broken by the distant sound of hooves. Jack stiffened, his heart pounding in his chest. He stepped outside, squinting into the fading light, and there she was. The Apache woman, standing tall, her posture commanding, as if the very earth beneath her feet had come alive. This time, she was not alone. Behind her, a long line of Apache warriors, their faces painted with the marks of their tribe, moved in unison. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The scene before him was almost surreal, like something out of a legend. The warriors didn't look like they had come to fight. No, there was no aggression in their movements. They were here for something else, something more profound. As they approached, the woman stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Jack's. She stopped. A few feet away from him, her gaze steady, unyielding. "I told you I would return," she said, her voice calm but powerful. Jack couldn't speak. He simply nodded, unsure of what to say or do. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew one thing for sure: this was no coincidence. The woman had returned, and with her, she carried something more than just her own story. The warriors behind her, who had remained silent until now, began to circle around him, their eyes scanning every move he made. Jack didn't feel threatened. In fact, there was an overwhelming sense of respect in the air, as though the very land itself had sanctioned this moment. The woman's hand reached into her pouch and pulled out a small, intricately carved bone. She handed it to Jack, who took it carefully, feeling its weight in his palm. "This," she said, "is a symbol of our bond. It represents the truth that cannot be undone." Jack stared at the bone, turning it over in his hand. The carvings were strange, unlike anything he had ever seen. They told a story, one that seemed to speak directly to him. The woman continued, "You saved me in the storm. Now, the tribe has come to repay that debt. But it is not only gratitude you have earned. It is a responsibility." Jack didn't fully understand, but the seriousness in her voice made his stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The woman stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "You are not just a cowboy. You are now a part of something greater. Our tribe's future is intertwined with yours." Jack's mind raced. This was more than he had bargained for when he had pulled her from the canyon's edge. What had seemed like an act of kindness had now become a pact, a bond with people whose ways he didn't fully understand. The warriors behind her nodded in unison, as if they all shared in the gravity of her words. Jack had always thought of himself as just a man of the land, a lone cowboy with no ties to anyone or anything. But in that moment, standing before the Apache tribe, he realized that his life had changed forever. He wasn't alone anymore. He had a place in a story much bigger than himself. The woman turned, signaling for the warriors to fall back. As they did, Jack was left standing in the fading twilight, the weight of the bone in his hand, and the weight of his new reality settling over him like the cool evening air. The days that followed felt different to Jack Thompson. It was as if the very earth beneath him had shifted, and he was standing on new ground, not physically but emotionally, spiritually even. The Apache woman, whose name he had learned was Iona, had left him with more than just a bone token. She had left him with a sense of duty, a responsibility that he had never asked for, yet somehow felt compelled to accept. For the first time in his life, Jack realized that the choices he made were no longer just his own. The next morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, casting a golden light across the canyon, Jack found himself standing at the edge, gazing out at the vast expanse of land before him. His life as a cowboy had always been solitary, his days marked by the rhythm of nature, riding, tending to cattle, and fixing fences. It had been enough. But now, standing there with the bone token in his hand, he knew that his role in the world had changed. Iona's words echoed in his mind. Our tribe's future is intertwined with yours. What did that mean for him? Jack wasn't sure. He had always thought of himself as a man who lived by his own rules. But the Apache warriors who had stood before him, so silent and so powerful, had shown him that there was a bigger world at play, a world that went beyond his little corner of the West. He had helped Iona, yes, but what was the cost? Was there more to his involvement with the Apache than just a momentary act of kindness? That afternoon, Jack decided to find out. He saddled up his horse and rode toward the outskirts of the canyon, the familiar sound of hooves beneath him a comforting constant. As he rode, he thought of Iona and the tribe. He couldn't help but wonder about their lives, their customs, and how they saw the world. What was it like to live in such harmony with nature, to be a part of something so much larger than oneself? Jack had always believed that his life was small, that he was just a cowboy, a man of the land, no more important than the cattle he tended. But now, he wasn't so sure. He rode for hours, the sun sinking lower in the sky as he made his way through the rough terrain. It wasn't until the evening that he reached a small Apache camp tucked away near the edge of the forest. The campfire flickered in the twilight, casting long shadows across the faces of the tribe. Iona was there, standing with the other members of her tribe, her eyes meeting Jack's as he approached. She gave him a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement of his presence. Jack dismounted, his heart beating faster than it should have. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew that this moment was important, that it would change everything. I came to learn, Jack said, his voice steady but with an edge of uncertainty. Iona looked at him, her expression unreadable. What do you wish to learn? She asked, her voice calm but with an intensity that made Jack's chest tighten. About you, he said simply. About your people. About what it means to be Apache. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Iona stepped closer, the warmth of the fire casting a soft glow on her face. She looked at Jack for a long moment, as if weighing something in her mind. Then she spoke. It is not just about what it means to be Apache, she said. It is about what it means to live with honor, to live in balance with the earth and with each other. We do not ask for much. We ask only that we are respected, that our way of life is understood. Jack nodded slowly, taking in her words. He had heard of the Apache, of course, but to hear it from her, to feel the weight of it in her voice, was something different. He realized that his world, his understanding of what was right and wrong, had been limited. There was a depth to this world, a complexity that he had never considered before. As the evening wore on, Jack listened to the stories of the Apache, of their history, their struggles, and their triumphs. It was a world of fierce loyalty, of a deep connection to the land, and of a sense of community that Jack had never known. When the night was nearly over, and the last embers of the fire were fading, Iona turned to Jack. You have seen what we are, she said. But there is more to see. If you wish to walk with us, you must understand the responsibility that comes with it. Jack looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this new life that seemed to be unfolding before him. But one thing was clear, he couldn't turn away. Not now. Not after everything he had seen. I'm ready, Jack said quietly. Iona nodded. Then you are one of us now, she said, her voice filled with both certainty and warmth. Jack stood there, the firelight flickering in his eyes, feeling the pull of something much larger than himself. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in his life, Jack felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The days that followed were filled with change, though Jack couldn't always see it at first. The Apache camp was alive with activity, its members working in harmony with nature and each other. As Jack spent more time with the tribe, he learned their ways, how they respected the land, how they valued the balance between life and death, and how every action had meaning. For Jack, a man who had always lived by the rules of the Cowboy code, it was a revelation. He had been raised to be independent, to rely on no one but himself. But now, he was learning that the world was much larger, and that to truly understand it, one had to be willing to trust others. Ayana was always near, guiding him through the customs and teachings of her people. She taught him about the spirits of the land, the ancient songs passed down from generation to generation, and the importance of honoring the earth's rhythms. Jack found himself drawn to her quiet strength. She spoke little, but when she did, her words carried the weight of wisdom and experience. It wasn't long before Jack began to see the world through a different lens. One day, while walking through the forest with Ayana, Jack stopped and knelt down, his hand brushing against the earth. The ground beneath his fingers felt alive, warm with the energy of the land. He looked up at Ayana, his eyes filled with wonder. "I never knew it could feel like this," he said, his voice filled with awe. Ayana smiled softly. "The land speaks to those who listen," she replied, her voice calm and steady. "You are learning." Jack nodded, understanding what she meant. It wasn't just about the land, it was about the connection that existed between all things. The trees, the animals, the people, they were all part of a larger whole. The Apache people had always known this, and now Jack was beginning to understand it too. As the weeks passed, Jack became more integrated into the tribe. He helped with the daily tasks, tending to the horses, gathering food, and assisting with the construction of new shelters. But it wasn't just the physical labor that changed him, it was the sense of purpose he felt. For the first time in his life, Jack felt like he was part of something that mattered. He wasn't just a cowboy on the outskirts of society, he was a man with a role to play, a man whose actions could make a difference in the world. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting the canyon in golden light, Jack and Ayana sat together by the fire. The tribe was gathered around, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. The air was thick with the scent of burning sage and pine. Jack could feel the weight of the moment. It was a feeling he couldn't quite explain, but it was as if everything in his life had led him to this point. "What will happen next?" Jack asked, his voice soft but filled with curiosity. Ayana looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "The future is not written," she said. "But we will walk it together." Jack nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. The path ahead wasn't clear, but he knew one thing for sure, he wasn't walking it alone. He had the tribe, and he had Ayana. They were a family now, bound together by more than just blood or tradition. They were bound by something deeper, something that went beyond the physical world. As the fire burned low and the stars began to appear in the sky, Jack knew that his journey was far from over. It had only just begun. And whatever came next, he would face it with the strength and wisdom of the Apache people by his side. Weeks turned into months, and Jack had fully integrated into the Apache way of life. His days were now filled with purpose, and his nights were spent by the fire, learning the ways of his new family. The more time he spent with Ayana and the tribe, the more he realized how deeply his life had changed. His once solitary existence, marked by the endless ride across barren landscapes, now felt like a distant memory. In its place, he had found a home, an unexpected home, but a home nonetheless. One morning, after a night of heavy rain, the landscape of the canyon was transformed. The earth, rich with the scent of wet soil, seemed to breathe in the fresh air. The birds sang louder, and the sound of the river rushing through the canyon filled the air. Jack stood at the edge of the camp, watching as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the clouds, casting a golden glow across the valley. Ayana approached him, her presence calming despite the uncertainty that still lingered in his chest. "It is a new beginning," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of the land itself. Jack looked at her, feeling both grateful and unsure. "I never thought I'd be here, in a place like this," he admitted. "I've always been a cowboy, just a man of the land. But now it feels like I'm part of something more." Ayanna nodded, understanding without words. She had seen the transformation in Jack, from a solitary cowboy to a man who was learning to walk in harmony with the world around him. "The earth has its own way of drawing people together," she said. "Sometimes it brings us where we are needed the most." Jack glanced over at the tribe as they prepared for the day's work, their movements efficient and purposeful. There was a quiet strength in the way they worked together, a bond that was both unspoken and unbreakable. He had come to admire them deeply, not just for their strength but for their respect for one another and for the land. As the days passed, Jack found himself becoming more involved in the tribe's affairs. He helped with the hunting, the gathering, and the construction of new shelters. He spent time learning the language, picking up words and phrases that connected him even further to the people he had come to call family. But as much as Jack had adapted to this new life, there were still moments when the weight of his past pressed heavily on him. He was still a cowboy at heart, and there were times when he longed for the simplicity of his old life, the open sky, the endless horizons, and the freedom that had come with being alone. But every time that feeling crept in, Ayanna was there, grounding him with her calm presence. She had shown him that true freedom wasn't just about riding across the plains. It was about being connected to something larger than oneself, something eternal. One afternoon, Jack and Ayanna sat by the river, watching the water flow by. The sun was high, and the air was warm, but there was a coolness in the breeze that hinted at the changing seasons. Ayanna turned to Jack, her gaze steady. "You are part of this now," she said softly. "The land has accepted you, and so have we. You are no longer just a cowboy. You are a brother, a protector." Jack felt a lump rise in his throat at her words. He had never expected to hear anything like this. In his old life, he had never been anyone's protector. He had only looked after himself. But now, in this new life, he felt like he had a purpose. "Thank you," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say. I never imagined that I would be here, with you, with all of you." Ayanna smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling as she did. "You don't need to say anything. Just be here. That is enough." As the sun began to set, casting a warm orange hue across the landscape, Jack felt a sense of peace settle over him. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Surrounded by the people who had accepted him, who had taught him what it meant to live with honor and respect, Jack knew that his journey was far from over. It had only just begun. And whatever came next, he would face it with the strength of the Apache people by his side. The days passed in a blur, each one blending into the next as Jack grew more accustomed to his new life with the Apache. The land had become a part of him, its rhythms now his own. He no longer felt the isolation that had once weighed so heavily on his heart. The sounds of the canyon, the rustling of the leaves in the breeze, the calls of the birds, and the steady flow of the river all brought him peace. In this life, he had found something deeper than just survival. He had found connection. But despite this newfound harmony, there were still moments of doubt, small cracks in the veneer of tranquility that threatened to break through. Jack sometimes woke in the middle of the night, the weight of his past pulling him back. His days as a cowboy felt distant, but the memories of the lonely trail and the open skies still lingered in his mind. There were moments when he wondered if he had truly changed, if he was still the man he had once been. Ayanna seemed to sense his inner turmoil. She had a way of knowing when Jack needed to talk and when he needed silence. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the warmth of the flames casting flickering shadows on their faces, she turned to him, her gaze steady and knowing. "You are not just a cowboy anymore," she said softly. Jack looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "I know," he replied, his voice quiet. But sometimes, it feels like that part of me is still there. I don't know if I can ever leave it behind completely. Ayana didn't speak immediately. Instead, she watched the fire, her expression thoughtful. The crackling of the flames seemed to fill the silence between them. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. Your past is part of you, Jack. It always will be. But it does not define you. You have chosen to walk with us, to be part of this tribe. That is what matters now. Who you were does not have to be who you are. Her words struck Jack deeply. It was true, he had made the choice to be here, to live with the Apache, to walk in their ways. His past, with all its struggles and loneliness, no longer had the power it once held over him. He had found a new path, a new purpose. As the fire burned low, Ayana stood and stretched, her silhouette framed by the darkening sky. Come, she said. I want to show you something. Jack followed her as she led him through the camp, the sounds of the night filling the air. They walked in silence for a while, the soft crunch of the earth beneath their feet the only sound. Finally, they reached a small hill overlooking the valley. From here, the entire camp could be seen, the flickering lights from the fires dancing in the distance. Ayana turned to Jack, her expression soft yet resolute. This land is a part of you now, she said. You have helped protect it, helped honor it. And in return, it has welcomed you. Jack looked out over the valley, the beauty of the land taking his breath away. It was as if the earth itself was speaking to him, reminding him of the choice he had made and the life he had embraced. He had come here looking for something, though he hadn't known what. And now, standing on this hill, looking out at the Apache camp below, he realized what he had found. It wasn't just a place. It wasn't just a way of life. It was family. The Apache had taken him in, not out of obligation, but out of respect. They had welcomed him, taught him, and shared with him their ways. And in turn, he had given them his trust, his loyalty, and his heart. Jack had finally found a place where he belonged. As they stood there in the quiet of the evening, Jack felt a sense of peace wash over him. It was a peace that had eluded him for so long, but now, it was here. Ayana was right. The land had accepted him, and so had the people. His past was behind him, and his future was ahead. Whatever that future might hold, he was ready to face it with the Apache by his side. As the weeks turned into months, Jack felt more and more like a true member of the Apache tribe. His skills with horses had quickly earned him a place among the tribe's best riders, and his knowledge of the land made him an asset during the hunting trips. Though the tribe had accepted him fully, Jack still found himself reflecting on his past, on the life he had lived before the canyon, the solitude that had once felt so natural. But as time passed, those memories grew dimmer, like the fading light at the end of a long day. One morning, as Jack sat outside his small shelter, the sun casting a soft, golden light over the camp, Ayana approached him. She was as calm as ever, her presence soothing even in the quiet of the morning. Jack, she began, her voice steady. Today is an important day for the tribe. Jack looked up, his curiosity piqued. What do you mean? He asked. Ayana looked out across the camp, where the tribe was gathered in preparation. Today, we will honor the land that has given us so much. It is a day of thanksgiving. A day when we give back, not just for what we have taken, but for what we are entrusted with. Jack nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. He had witnessed many ceremonies in the tribe, each one more profound than the last. The Apache had a deep respect for the earth, for the animals, and for each other, and that respect was reflected in every action they took. Ayana extended her hand to Jack, an invitation to join the ceremony. Without hesitation, Jack took it. As they walked together, the tribe began to move in unison, their steps measured, their movements in perfect harmony. The air was thick with the scent of sage, and the distant sound of drums began to fill the air, setting a rhythmic tone for the ceremony. Jack felt a deep sense of reverence in the way the tribe moved, in the way they acknowledged the earth beneath their feet, the sky above their heads, and the lives they lived in between. It was a way of being that Jack had never known, but that felt more natural with each passing day. As they reached a clearing near the river, the tribe gathered in a circle. Ayanna stood beside Jack, her eyes scanning the faces of her people, and then she turned to him. "This is where we honor the spirit of the land," she said. "We give thanks for the rain that nourishes the earth, for the animals that feed us, and for the people who walk beside us." Jack stood silently, taking in the ceremony. He had never been one for rituals, but there was something about this moment that made him feel connected to something much larger than himself. As the tribe chanted in their native tongue, Jack felt the weight of their words settle deep in his chest. They weren't just words, they were a promise, a covenant with the earth, with each other, and with the future. When the ceremony ended, Jack felt a sense of peace that he had never experienced before. It was as if the world had shifted, and he was now in tune with the land, with the people, and with the rhythm of life itself. As the tribe gathered their belongings and began to return to camp, Ayanna stayed behind for a moment, her gaze fixed on the river. Jack joined her, standing silently by her side. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. "For bringing me here. For showing me what it means to be part of something bigger." Ayanna turned to him, her expression soft yet serious. "You've always been a part of it, Jack," she said. "You just had to remember." Jack nodded, a sense of understanding settling over him. He had been lost, but now he had found his place, his purpose. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but he knew that he was no longer walking it alone. He had found a new family, a new home, and in that moment, he realized that he had found himself too. Together they walked back to the camp, the sounds of the tribe's voices carrying on the wind, a reminder of the unity and strength they shared. Jack knew that, no matter what lay ahead, he was ready to face it with the Apache by his side. The days grew warmer as the season shifted, and Jack Thompson had settled into his new life as a member of the Apache tribe. His bond with the land had deepened, and with each passing day, his role within the tribe grew more significant. No longer a mere outsider, Jack had come to understand the intricate web of connections that bound the Apache people to the earth, to each other, and to the spirits of their ancestors. The rhythms of the camp felt like a steady heartbeat, and Jack had become part of it, his movements aligning with theirs as naturally as if he had been born to it. One morning, as he stood by the river, the soft current rushing by his feet, Ayanna approached him. She was silent at first, as though gathering her thoughts, before she spoke in her calm, measured voice. "You have done well, Jack," she said. "The tribe has accepted you as one of their own. But now, the time has come for you to take your place fully." Jack looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly in confusion. "Take my place? What do you mean?" Ayanna smiled faintly, her eyes soft but filled with a quiet intensity. "You are not just a member of this tribe now. You are a leader. You will help guide us, not just in times of peace, but in times of struggle as well." Jack felt a weight settle in his chest. He had never seen himself as a leader, and the thought of taking on such a responsibility felt daunting. But as he looked into Ayanna's steady gaze, he understood that she believed in him. And in a way, he believed in himself, too. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," Jack admitted quietly, his voice almost a whisper. Ayanna placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. "You are ready, Jack. You have always been ready. Leadership is not about being perfect. It is about doing what is right, even when it is difficult." Her words rang in his ears, and for the first time in a long while, Jack felt a sense of clarity. He wasn't just here to survive anymore. He was here to help shape the future of the tribe, to ensure that the Apache people would continue to thrive. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the canyon in soft hues of purple and gold, Jack stood with Ayanna and the other tribal leaders. They had gathered to discuss matters of importance, the future of their people, and the challenges that lay ahead. Jack had never been a part of such a council before, but he felt a deep sense of purpose as he listened to the discussions, offering his thoughts when asked, and learning from the wisdom of the others. Ayanna's faith in him had given him the strength to speak up, to offer suggestions that he never would have considered before. When the meeting ended, the tribe's leaders looked at him with respect in their eyes. Jack had found his place, not just in the tribe, but as a leader, someone who would help guide the Apache into the future. As the days turned into weeks, Jack's confidence grew. He continued to learn, to adapt, and to understand the deeper truths of the Apache way of life. And with each passing day, he knew he was becoming more than just a cowboy in the West. He was a man of purpose, a man of the land, a man who had found his home and his people. One night, after a long day of work, Jack and Ayanna sat together by the fire, the flames dancing and casting shadows across their faces. Jack looked at her, his expression serious. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You've changed my life." Ayanna turned to him, her eyes soft but knowing. "You have always had the power to change your life, Jack," she said. "You just needed to see it." Jack nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. For so long, he had felt lost, as if he was drifting without purpose. But now, with the Apache by his side, he understood that he had a role to play in this world, a role that went beyond survival. He had found a family, a tribe, and a future that he had never imagined. As the fire crackled and the stars began to fill the night sky, Jack realized that his journey had only just begun. There was still much to learn, much to do, but for the first time in his life, he felt ready. Ready to face whatever came next, with the strength and wisdom of the Apache people guiding him every step of the way. As the seasons continued to change, so did Jack's understanding of his place in the world. With each passing day, his bond with the Apache grew stronger, and his role in the tribe became clearer. He had learned to see the world through their eyes, to understand the delicate balance of nature, and to appreciate the wisdom that had been passed down through generations. But even as Jack embraced this new life, there were moments of doubt. He had lived a life of solitude for so long, and the weight of responsibility he now carried was something he had never expected. The quiet cowboy, once content with the open land and the horizon, now stood at the heart of a tribe, leading, guiding, and learning with every decision he made. One evening, as the fire crackled and the stars filled the night sky, Jack sat with Ayanna by the river. The water flowed gently, its soft murmur a contrast to the silent contemplation that filled the air between them. Jack had come to appreciate these moments of peace, moments where words were unnecessary, and the world simply existed in its purest form. "I never thought this life would be mine," Jack said, his voice quiet, almost reverent. Ayanna turned to him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "But it is yours now," she replied, her voice calm but full of certainty. "You have earned your place among us, Jack. The land has accepted you, and so have we." Jack felt a warmth spread through him at her words. It was true. He had earned his place. His actions, his choices, and his willingness to learn had all led him to this moment. He wasn't just a cowboy anymore. He was a man of the land, a leader among the Apache, a protector of their way of life. As they sat in silence, the weight of the responsibility began to settle more comfortably in Jack's chest. It wasn't a burden, it was a privilege. He understood now that leadership wasn't about power or control. It was about service, about doing what was best for those who trusted you. The next morning, as the sun rose over the canyon, Jack gathered with the tribe. Today was an important day. The tribe was preparing for a journey to a sacred site where they would honor their ancestors and seek guidance for the future. Jack had never been on a journey like this before, and as they traveled through the rugged terrain, he felt the weight of the tribe's history, their struggles, and their triumphs. He walked beside Ayanna, who shared stories of their ancestors, of battles fought and victories won, and of the land they had protected for generations. Jack listened intently, absorbing every word, every lesson. He had become part of their story now, a chapter in a history that stretched back hundreds of years. As they reached the sacred site, a place nestled deep in the heart of the canyon, the tribe gathered in a circle. The air was thick with the scent of sage, and the sound of drums echoed through the valley. Jack stood with the tribe, his heart swelling with pride as he realized how far he had come. He had once been a man lost, searching for something he couldn't name. But now he knew. He had found his purpose, his family, and his home. Ayanna stood beside him, her presence steady and unwavering. "This is where we honor those who came before us," she said softly. "This is where we ask for guidance as we move forward." Jack nodded, feeling a deep sense of respect for the traditions that had shaped the Apache people. As the ceremony began, Jack closed his eyes, his thoughts drifting to the past, the present, and the future. He thought of the lonely cowboy he had once been, and he thought of the man he had become. He wasn't just part of the tribe now, he was part of something much larger. The ceremony lasted well into the evening, the flickering fire casting shadows across the faces of the tribe. Jack felt a sense of peace settle over him, knowing that he was exactly where he needed to be. The land, the tribe, and the future were all connected, and he was honored to be a part of it. As the stars filled the night sky, Jack stood tall, his heart full of gratitude. He had found his place, his purpose, and the people who would walk with him through whatever came next. The journey was far from over, but Jack was ready. With the Apache by his side, he knew he could face anything that lay ahead.